In today's video, we're going to talk about how to recognize the different parenting styles and use them to our advantage. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It is Lydia. Thanks for joining me. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the parenting styles. There are 4 different types of parenting styles, and most commonly, not one family fits into one category. Most families are a toss-up between 2 different parenting styles. So I want to dive into what the different parenting styles are, and then what they can look like, or how we can recognize them as babysitters going into a household. The reason I believe it is really important to recognize a parenting style is so that we can continue that parenting style and the discipline styles while the parent has stepped away. It is so much harder to go in and create your own rules than to just go in and follow what the parents have already set in place. Plus, you're not the parent, you're just going to be substituting for the parents. So therefore, no rule making, just rule implementing. All right, so let's discuss what the 4 parenting styles are. The first one is permissive. So this is child-driven, rarely gives or enforces rules to their children, overindulges in the child to avoid conflict. They are more friends to their children than actual parents. The next one is neglectful. So this is an uninvolved or absent parent, somebody who provides little nurturance or guidance, is indifferent to the child's social, emotional, and behavioral needs. An authoritative parent solves problems together with the child, sets clear rules and expectations for the children, open communicates, and has natural consequences for the children. An authoritarian is a parent who is parent-driven. It is the parent's way or the highway, sets strict rules and punishments, has one-way communication with little consideration of the child's social, emotional, and behavioral needs. So, most families don't sit down with one of these charts and go, that is a parenting style I want to do in this family. That's how I want to parent, right? Because if that was the case, they would all parent the same way, because some of these sound perfect, while others don't. Like neglectful is not a great parenting style, right? However, most parents fall in 2 categories versus just one. There isn't just one specific category that most fall into. There are a couple families that are very strict to that parenting style. However, it's more likely they're juggling between 2. What affects the parents and their parenting style is a number of things. First, the child, what the child is like, their personality, and what they need. Say that you have a child who's more laid back, who you can kind of be permissive with, you can be somewhat of a friend, and they don't take advantage of that. They're still very respectful of the rules outside of the household. Some permissive families, there's no boundaries within the household, so the child doesn't believe in boundaries outside the household, where some kids actually understand the difference between no boundaries in the household versus boundaries at school. So there's the child's personality and how they act. There's also the parents' personalities and how they act and how they grew up from their childhood. There are parents who have a style that they grew up with, a parenting style that their parents used on them, and did not like it at all and will be the opposite. And then there's parents who love the parenting style that their parents used on them and will continue that down to their children. And then also lifestyle, how the family unit works. Where is mom and dad, and how often are they involved in the child's life? And there's a number of reasons why families would fall into one category or 2 different categories rather than another. So there's a lot that goes into it, and we never ever want to judge a parent's parenting style, because we are there for a very small snippet of the entire family's life. So we never judge unless it is harming the child. If the child is being harmed, there needs to be action taken. So how do we recognize these parenting styles? When I walk into a household, I really take in my environment, right? So for example, a neglectful family, when I walk into a house, and in the 13 years that I've been working with children, I've never experienced this, and I hope you never have to experience a child who's being neglected. But what I would imagine, and I have heard experiences from other people, other nannies, when you walk into a house, the house smells very musty and dirty. The child is sitting in a wet diaper or a poopy diaper that has been, you can tell when a diaper's been over soaked. It's a full diaper. They're dragging it at this point. There is food left on the counter that's starting to mold, or sometimes you walk in and the child is crying and you can tell they've been crying for a while, and mom and dad are just dismissive of it and not really paying attention. So that is what a neglectful family would look like. Again, thankfully, I've never had to experience that. It is heartbreaking to hear those who have had to experience that. So fingers crossed you never have to. In a permissive family household, when walking in, the signs that I look for is really, how do I say this nicely? Things that trigger the child. So there are a normal amount of things that trigger children that start a tantrum. We've talked about it in past videos, how we can completely avoid tantrums. However, with a permissive family where there is no boundaries or there's no set expectations, when you ask a child in that kind of parenting style realm, if you ask them to do something normal or ask them or question them at all, they tend to throw a tantrum right away. There's a really bad reaction from it. They don't care to hear what you say. They don't listen at all. It's a very unnormal reaction to something that you've said. So usually I ask questions to the kids, right? We ask questions to get to know them and see what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do in the household. And if I have asked a simple question and I get a bad reaction, I can kind of tell that we're in a permissive parenting style household. Now, it's not a bad thing. Like I said earlier, it depends on the person's or on the child's behavior and their personality. So it might work for them, but to recognize what that parenting style is can be difficult with a child who's very laid back, who can still follow the rules but doesn't really have any rules, if that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about what an authoritative parenting style household looks like. Again, this is parent and child working on issues together. They set boundaries and clear expectations. They're very communicative with their children about those clear expectations. And then they also believe in natural consequences. So, for example, when we were younger, my mom, if we forgot our lunchbox at home, my mom would not bring us our lunchbox. We had to deal with the consequence of not grabbing them. Those expectations were set beforehand. You need to make sure you grab your lunchbox before we head off to school. And my consequence for not doing that or meeting that expectation was that I had to figure out lunch, which was just basically school lunch. But that is a natural consequence. That's an example. So to recognize a authoritative parenting style household, there are expectations and there are boundaries. So when you ask, is she or he allowed to do this? Is she or he, what time is bedtime? If there's a set bedtime and there's set expectations, but they're also communicating that with the children. We talked about bedtime is 8 o'clock tonight because it's a school night. Or we said that we don't have to do bath tonight, but tomorrow night we're going to take a bath. Or tomorrow morning we will be taking a shower. So you can kind of see and hear that not only are they talking to you about what they're expecting from the child, and again, this is only if they're old enough, but they're also communicating that with the child, and it sounds like they've communicated this with the child before I even arrived. And that household is pretty easy to maintain the expectations and boundaries. It is very simple and easy for me to talk through emotions with these children and communicate with them because they already do it with their parents. They've learned that skill and they've learned that not always tantrum throwing is the best option. Sometimes it's just to communicate. So with authoritative, this is what you're going to find in most families with a little bit of permissive or authoritative with a little bit of authoritarian. So that's going to be mostly your main, what you're going to find in most families with a little bit of something else. So authoritarian. Authoritarian is parent-driven. Parents swear the highway. Rules and expectations are set. There's no communicating about them. There's no agreeing on them. It is what it is. It's not going to change. They have, not that they don't care about their kids' not well-being, social and emotional being. They don't always put it first, if that makes sense. So it's not that they don't care, but it's not always put first or not always thought about when putting these expectations and rules in place. So when walking into a household like that, most of the kids that I work with who are in an authoritarian household, they know exactly what's happening. They don't question much. They know their routine. They don't go outside of that routine. They're very forthcoming about what mom and dad will and will not allow, and they won't test boundaries. They won't push boundaries, and they won't test me either. They know what they're allowed to do and they're not allowed to do. So it's pretty easy to see that. Again, most families are not always like this, but I do have a couple families that for their lifestyle, that works for them and for the child's behaviors and their personality. It works. Now you have the 4 parenting styles, how to recognize them when you walk into a household. Now let's throw a curveball, because that's always fun. Some of these families have multiple children. Multiple children have different personalities, different behavioral styles. They're different people altogether. Therefore, there are some households that discipline and parent each children individually differently. For example, my mom parented each of me and my siblings differently. Not crazy amount of difference, but slightly different. Now, that can happen in households that you babysit for, because what's working for the youngest child may not work for what's working for the middle child, and that may not be working for the oldest, right? Not only that, but at different ages, different parenting styles work. So when you have a young child who is learning everything and just soaking up the world, they may need a little bit more structure. Whereas you get to a 3 or 4-year-old who is now testing the waters and testing the boundaries and wanting and becoming their own person and developing their personality a little bit more, they may need a little bit more laid back, giving them options type of parenting style, right? Let them have a say in what they're doing and what they're getting dressed in. So not only is it what child, what age, what household, there is a lot that goes into parenting styles. And again, they don't sit down with a chart and pick out what they want. It develops over time and it's different. So you may have, for example, I've babysat for families in the past with a certain parenting style. I go back a couple years later and the parenting style is completely different because their lifestyle has changed, their child's personality and behaviors have changed, their age has changed. There's a lot going on there. So why am I telling you all this? I think it is very important to understand the difference between the 4 parenting styles, also how to recognize the 4 parenting styles. As a babysitter, when you can do that and you can walk into a house and continue those parenting styles, everybody's night is going to be so much easier. For example, if you go ahead and put a child in timeout who mom and dad don't do that, they don't understand fully what that means. It's very new and weird to them, and now not only are you a stranger coming to their home, you're making them do something that's not normal to them. So understanding what parenting styles that mom and dad do use, you can go ahead and use that while they're out for the night. It's just going to make everybody's life so much easier. Remember, no rule making, just rule implementing. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.